Before I teach, I usually give excuses for why it might not be good. So I don't want to miss that part. So I was sick all week. I got sick on Sunday with a pretty high fever. I had COVID. I mean, you got something better than that, COVID? I mean, I was laid out. So this was all last minute. I could do such a better job if I had more time, which is kind of a lie because I would still wait to the last minute. That's a problem I have. And so I just want to also pray again. I got prayed for, but let's just invite the Lord to speak to us in whatever way He wants to, and see what He does. So Lord, we just invite You in anytime we talk about You, Your heart, Your word, the people You love, especially the people You love that don't know You yet. Sorry, I'm going to cry a lot. Just open our hearts, Lord, to hear Your words. Amen. I'm a big crybaby, and I own that, and so don't be alarmed if I cry several times. So the series is Did You Catch That? I guess we've caught that by now, right? Anybody not caught that? How about you? Have you caught that? Caught that? Okay. Yeah, so, and this is the least expected. And so part of the process, which I was happy to be part of, I guess I'm on the teaching team, even though I don't teach very much, but I think I want to do more, but that's another story. But this topic came up, and we had this outline that we shared and we made comments on, which was really kind of a cool process. And this had nothing under it. I was like, oh, that's perfect. I like starting from nothing. And then, so if you've ever, I used to do this a little bit back when I worked for the state. We'd get these. Generally, there were like contracts. We're reviewing them, comment on this, comment on that. So that's what we're doing. So this was an interesting thing to me, the least expected. I'm like, when I first heard that, I got the picture in my mind who would be the least expected, but then I'm like, man, I wonder what other people think when they think, who wouldn't God use to speak to me? I was like, so I went through a process there. Part of that, I was kind of offended. I was like, well, why would we think that anybody would be excluded from that? So I really wrestled with that and thought, wow, I know who would be the least expected for me. And it would probably be very different than you. It'd be some guy in a golf cart, who's on the phone with his stockbroker. I'd be like, that would be the least expected for me. He'd be like, hey, sir, by the way, I got a tea time coming up, but I would love to pray for you. And the Lord spoke to me. I'd be like, what? You? But I've had experience of least expected. I remember, there's so many ways this goes. I had a profound experience when I was in seminary reading the Bhagavad Gita, one of the holy books of Hinduism, right? The whole basis for the Hare Krishnas, and the first half of that book was all about just how jacked up we are. I was like, I have never met a group of people that understand human depravity more than Hindus. My mind opened. I was like, wow, no wonder they think they need 1,000 lifetimes to get it right. And that's not enough. They really got it. That blessed me, as strange as that might seem. I was like, they're partway there. They know the problem. The solution, the second half of the Bhagavad Gita, not so much. It's about human effort, which is so terribly, terribly sad. Another time when I was at seminary, I didn't finish seminary. I'm not like Paul laying out my resume. I went to Bible college that is now closed, and I went to a seminary, but I didn't finish. So please take all that with a grain of salt. But I took a world religion class, and we went to a mosque. It's the first time I'd been to a mosque. And they knew we were coming. It was arranged. They took us down in the basement, and some of the leaders of the mosque, all men, were up there just telling us how wrong we were about things, right? And then from the back, a woman spoke, and it just captured my heart. Now, I'm not saying she knows all the truth, but she had something, right? She had something. And she talked about how graceful and how full of grace and love God was. I was like, I did not expect to hear that. I had hope for her. So I don't know who the least expected is for you, and I don't know what that would mean, but we need to ask ourselves some of those questions. Why wouldn't you expect to hear from God from them? And there's been many times in my life when I've had that experience. So whenever I was trying to figure out which way to go, I started looking back at our process, and one of the people that commented on, and it was Danielle, but he was like, what should we do with this? I think she and I were the only ones that commented. She said, I want it to be a reflection of the way God seems to really enjoy speaking to us through the least expected, least powerful, often least wanted, noticed among us. And I was like, yeah, that's good stuff, isn't it? And so I just immediately replied back. I said, this is our bread and butter at Waymakers. You know, Waymakers is a church for the disabled, the poor, the elderly. We have food pantry. 40 to 60 people line up outside our doors every Tuesday and Thursday to get some food and just have somebody be nice to them for a minute and get out of the heat or get out of the cold. And so I want to say the weaker members are to be shown special honor and that they're indispensable. And that comes right from 1 Corinthians 12, which we're going to look at in a little bit. And I write different than I talk. Does anybody else write different than you talk? I'm like, why do I write like this? Who am I trying to impress? But I'm not trying to use like flowery language. It's just, and I wrote, this is where joy resides. And I was like, you ever write something and afterwards you're like, where did that come from? And then for me, then I usually cry. And that happened to me several times yesterday and the day before. And then I wrote, I hear some pretty amazing things from people that no one listens to. Yeah. Just so much value in the experience of the poor and the marginalized. You know, we all know what it means to suffer and to be lonely and to have struggles. And when we see someone else who has it in just such clarity, such horror, such depth, it kind of gives us some focus on our own. And so me getting involved in Waymakers wasn't just haphazard. I mean, God had been doing things with me for a whole lifetime. And when I was younger, I think it's very fair to say I was marginalized and isolated in ways that we often are in our culture. I was always kind of a square peg. And when you're a square peg, you start noticing other people that are square pegs too. And sometimes you band together, and we do whole movies about that and sitcoms, right? Freaks and Geeks, right? It was if you're an older person. And so God led me through a number of things that were just very formative for me. And looking back, I can see I had this epiphany the other day. I was just thinking about something that happened to me in kindergarten, of all places. And God has opened my mind to that a couple of times now. So when I was in kindergarten in Maplewood, in an all-white neighborhood, of course, it's a local school, so the people that go there, all white, right? Not a single black kid. I don't think there was an Asian kid, a Hispanic kid, all white kids. That's all the thing was in my neighborhood. So I remember in kindergarten, and I think I might have even told this story here before. I tell it so much because I like the sound of my own voice and I love these stories. But one day the teacher, a little black girl showed up at our school. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. That's all I thought. Oh, wow, a new kid. And then I remember the teacher pulling me out. She said, Mike, can I come talk to you? And she's sitting in her chair, and she leans into me really seriously and says, Mike, we don't have enough cubbies for the rugs. You remember how you had the cubbies for your rug in kindergarten? She said, would you share your cubby with the new girl? And I remember, it's amazing you remember these things. I remember the look on her face, and I remember as a 5-year-old, I was a little precocious. I was like, what's the big deal with this, you know? I remember just kind of going, what? I'm like, yeah, sure. Never thought about it again. When I was in like my 30s, I thought about that, and I was like, it finally dawned on me. It was like, oh, it wasn't a big deal to me, but it was a really big deal to her, because she didn't know she had to pick a kid out of the class to ask this question, right? Who's not going to be offended by this? Who's not going to say no? Who's not been raised in a way that they're going to think this is a bad idea? She picked me. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Didn't think much more about it. And then recently, I was going back through just all the path that God has taken me on in my life, and he brought that back to my memory. And he said something different to me about it. And he said, I've had my hand on you from the very beginning. Just blew my mind. Blew my mind. So I think about other events that happened in my life. I remember as a teenager when I finally meet the Lord and finally get invited to a church by a kind relative. I ended up at a church, and I'm 17 years old then, and a man about my age came in who had profound developmental disabilities. I didn't even know what they were back then, but he's not a very high-functioning person. he came in, and I became his friend. I'd drive him home, and I just remember just that first exposure and just what that meant and how I kind of tried to process that. And I think about going on to Bible college. Again, I personally felt kind of marginalized and isolated. I did not fit in well with that culture, and I ended up leaving for that reason and others. But I found myself forming communities with other people that were kind of marginalized there. And then just started feeling God continuing to pull me towards the lost and the least, as we like saying it, Waymakers. So while I was in Bible college, I went on 3 trips, missions trips, and all of them have became so important to me. First one I went to was went to Los Angeles for a whole summer and worked at a church for Chinese immigrants. At that point, I was really passionate about reaching out to immigrants. And and Asian chicks are really cute when you're 19. There was no dating allowed, but thank goodness, because that would have went poorly. Would have become another trauma for me. But I was moved there just to be so immersed in another culture. It was like living in another country. I spent all my time with people, first generation, people from China and Taiwan and mostly Hong Kong. And it was amazing. And at night, I didn't have anything to do. I would go hang around in Chinatown well into the night and just hang around with homeless people and organ grinders. There was a dude there with a couple of monkeys. It was really cool. One was dressed like a cowboy and the other was dressed like a cowgirl. I'd sit there and watch him while he got quarters from people, but just started to see homeless people. And then the next trip I did was in Chicago. I spent the whole summer up there working with a missionary who was starting a church for Native Americans in downtown Chicago. I had no idea how many Native Americans were in Chicago. They had their whole neighborhood there. And that's when things really accelerated for me. I was around, they didn't have much for me to do, which was a great disappointment to me, but in God's providence, it was such an amazing thing. I just spent all day sitting on a wall with a bunch of Native guys. All day. Some of them would tell me stories. Some of them would be mad at me and want to tell me off. I had all kinds of experiences there. But on that street was full of people that were struggling with addiction, full of people that had untreated mental illness. I have such vivid pictures. I remember a picture of a lady just sitting on the sidewalk. She had a long skirt, just legs out, just head in hands, just bitterly weeping and screaming and watching the people walk around her. I'm like, wow, this has become normal for them. I don't know what was up with her. She didn't ask for any money. She was just there in pain. Had so many episodes like that there. And then my last trip, I went on a trip to Hamilton, Missouri. We did these things where we would travel. We would set up these teams and we would travel to churches that were in this denomination. And people could sign up. It was on spring break. And there were a lot of people called to the Bahamas. I thought that was amazing. There must be some real revival going on in the Bahamas. But I noticed nobody had signed up for this trip to Hamilton, Missouri. Population like 7 or something. Literally it was like 153. And I was like, somebody needs to go there. I went. My roommate went with me because he had pity on me, and another dude went with me, and I don't know why he went. I think he just didn't want to drive very far. But we got there, and the man that was there was himself one of those marginalized people. I'm looking at him, and I'm like, he's not going anywhere in this denomination, which is one of the things that made me leave. But he was the most amazing guy I ever met, one of the most humble and generous guys I ever met, just laboring away in a little town. Brilliant guy, loving guy. And I still remember that he said when he was in Bible college, they nicknamed him Orville. And I know that wasn't flattering, that was insulting, but that meant so much to me. So God continued to put amazing people and amazing experiences around me, and they didn't mean much at the time, but it just grew this concern in me for people that weren't being paid attention to. And then life got the better of me, and I crashed and burned for a number of years and left the church. And even during that time, I had these people assembling around me, and they were still looking to me. And somebody did so much counseling with people during that era, and was so lost myself, but never quite let go of what God was doing. And then ended up in a career working for Missouri Probation and Parole for 23 years, where I Mostly, well, I just worked with people with severe mental illness, and I learned so very much there about addiction and about mental illness and all the things that drive people to the margins. So now I'm at Waymakers. Waymakers is a church for people with disabilities, the elderly, the poor, the marginalized, and we have a church service and a food pantry and a social club for people with developmental disabilities. And now the unexpected, the people that we think don't have things to offer, they're not the minority there. That's what the church is, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's a place for the poor, the disabled, and for their families, and for people that want to love them and be in community with them. And so I love it so much, not so much because of the individual people, but it's an ideal for me. And this is a hard ideal because, every local church has its setting and time and place and culture. And if you've got a church in Chesterfield, you shouldn't expect that people from the inner city are going to drive out to Chesterfield. That's not going to happen. And I'm passionate about the local church. I wish I could walk to my church. I wish my church was in my neighborhood, right? But we want a church that reflects what our community really is. And when we start talking about people that have severe brokenness through disabilities, poverty, trauma, addiction, they're all around us here too, aren't they? And we want to have a place where they can come, a place where they can feel safe, a place where they can connect to Jesus and where they can connect with other people. It doesn't seem to be optional. It seems like that should be the norm. But it's so hard, isn't it? It's so hard. And so I find Waymakers fascinating in that we're trying to do that. And it's the first opportunity I ever really got to see the focus not be on the needs of the many, but the needs of the few. Not to sound Marxist or anything. Not a Marx fan, by the way. So we talk a lot about diversity in our churches, and diversity is a good thing, but it does reflect the makeup of our community. And we want to be diverse, but not in any kind of programmatic way where we're checking off the boxes. Okay, we're 3% immigrants. We got the guy in the wheelchair. Don't forget the guy at the wheelchair. I remember I was at one of my uncle's house, who's now dead, but a good death. He went to prison, met Jesus, came back out, got his life together, and died. That's a win, isn't it? I have a pretty screwed up family. Yours might be worse. We can talk. So my uncle, he was so proud of me. He's like, he's just, he's in that world where having a pastor in the family, that's a big deal. I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And so I'm sitting at in his house, and he's having a big party, and he's got his pastor out there. And his pastor's asking me questions about the church, and my uncle's just glowing, got my nephew here, he's a pastor. And I'm like, okay. I don't know if that's entirely healthy, but I'll take it. And this guy starts asking me questions. This is from a country church in central Illinois. And this isn't my uncle that just died, if anybody knows my story. But it's a different uncle. I got a lot of dead uncles. Do you? I got a lot of dead uncles. I had a big family, getting smaller all the time. So he starts asking me questions. He's like, it's for the disabled. And I'm like, yeah. And he looks over at a guy next to him, and they start talking about their church. He goes, we got that disabled fella at our church. And the guy had some physical problems. I won't tell you what it is, but it's a big deal, right? He's like, his name, it's Mark or whatever it was. He's like, and he does real good, doesn't he? Oh yeah, he does real good, real good. I was like, okay, that's cool. You got a disabled guy, okay? Check the box. And I guess the better way to say it would be a person with disabilities, but. And so then the conversation turned, and where's your church at? I'm South St. Louis City. And it got real dark real fast. And then they start saying the race stuff, not even very subtly. Like, yeah. And I think at one time, one of the pastor or his assistant pastor, whatever it says, used the term, those blacks. I'm like, you lost me. You lost me. And I said, half the people in my church are black. And then I'm not very capricious. I don't really like poking at people, but the affect changed. And it was like, yeah, well, has the weather been really hot lately? How about those Cardinals? And I was like, yeah, we're calling this. And I spared them. I walked out of the room, but I was like, wow, got to disable people. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, all right, got it. And so when we're trying to develop a community that's diverse, reflects our culture, and includes the poor, the elderly, the people with disabilities, and when you start thinking about people with disabilities, that's a big definition. People that are stuck in addiction, that's a disabling condition. If you're familiar with the medical field at all, the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, and the 5th edition, which is now being revised. I've never seen the revised edition because it costs like $3,000, but they added a whole category of addictive disorders. It's one of the most disabling conditions you have. Trauma. Such a huge thing. It's all around us. And so if we want to be, I used to say this to David a lot, and then I modified it at one point. I used to talk to David about this. I said, if we're not addressing addiction and mental illness, and then later I added trauma, I said, we're not really culturally relevant. We're not really prepared to meet the real world that the people within 3 miles of our church live in, right? Because people die out here too. People here are born with mental illnesses. People here suffer trauma at a very high rate. We all do. And they're affected by it. It affects their ability to love and to connect with you. And through that, with Jesus. It's horrific. So, in my comments about this teaching, I referenced a couple things which come from 1 Corinthians 12. And I could just stand up here and talk. I guess we'd call that a testimony, but we're here to learn from God's word, and I don't want to, I'm not minimizing that. I've been obsessed with 1 Corinthians 12 for quite some time. I've probably talked about all this here before. I've definitely talked about it at Waymakers. If you ever come to Waymakers, you've heard all this. But 1 Corinthians 12, first few verses. Just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body. Is anybody else thinking about the Lever 2000 commercial here? Remember that soap, your many parts? Can't stop thinking about that. But all its many parts form one body. We get that, right? And Paul says, so it is with Christ. Now remember, in Corinthians, they had a few problems. They had a lot of problems. They had rampant immorality that they were saying was okay. They were having these love feasts, and all the rich people were coming in and eating up all the food and getting drunk, and the poor people didn't have anything to eat. I mean, they were fighting over all kinds of stuff, and they thought they were just fine. And if we turned the tables and they learned about the modern American church and the state it's in, they might go, what are those people doing? For one thing, they had a very diverse setting. Corinth was a very diverse setting. They've got Jews that have converted, Gentiles that have converted, slave, free, very diverse, reflective of their city, but it wasn't going well. And Paul jumps in with both feet to address that. He starts by, this is one of his main shots, saying, hey, you're one body. You're one body. He says, just your body has many parts, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit. Anybody else here get any Spirit besides the Holy Spirit? If so, we'll have a deliverance session down the road at that church. No, I'm joking. So as to form one body. And then he talks about some of that diversity, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free. Now, those are pretty big spectrums there, Jews and Gentiles, slave and free. And we were all given the one Spirit to drink. I love that, drinking from the Spirit. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but many. And so they had challenges, we have challenges. And I'm not trying to catalog all the challenges, but I'm talking specifically with how we address the needs of the impoverished. And if you're disabled in this country, you're probably facing poverty. Now, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body. Now, Paul's using absurdity, right? That's pretty absurd, isn't it? It would not, for that reason, stop being part of the body. Even if it felt that way, it would not stop being part of the body. And if an ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body. It would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And I love this. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? You ever thinking about a body that was all an eye? What was that? There was this group, the Residents, was it? They wore big eyeballs on stage. I always think of them. And then I was like, you know what? Our church today, not this church, but in America, a lot of us are just big eyes because we're always looking at stuff, but we're not doing a lot sometimes. And a lot of us become such just big consumers of visual content. We're not even walking into a church anymore. We're flipping TikTok videos from people that want 3 million views, and so they're just telling us the most absurd things about the Bible just because they want to pull you in. It's like, man, you don't want to just be an eye in this world. There's too much to draw you away. We need all the parts of the body functioning together. All right. Verse 17, if the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they're all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. So God has arranged the body just as he wanted. There's so many scriptures we could pull in, about the potter and the clay. You could probably think of a bunch yourself. And earlier in this chapter, one of the problems that the church in Corinth was just how they were utilizing spiritual gifts and what they were focusing on, and it wasn't broad enough, and it was getting out of whack. And he said then, he goes, God gives these gifts as he pleases. You don't just pull out the menu and go, yeah, I'd like the gift of prophecy, because that's what everybody would pick, right? Personally, I would pick the gift of wisdom, but I'm a maverick. But I'll take the gift of, can I get a side of word of knowledge with that? Just to kind of give it an extra little push? We don't get to do that. So it's another way of saying God is sovereign. And by sovereign, he gets to decide, and all our theology has to rest on that. Like at Waymakers lately, I've been teaching about spiritual gifts a little bit. Now, we consider ourselves interdenominational, so we don't lean in too hard on anything that will affect our mission. That sounds strange to you. If it does, I can explain to you what I mean by that. But we're talking about healing now, and we're talking about how we believe that God heals people. And last week, we just talked about, and what if he doesn't? And what if he doesn't? So we talk about the gifts, and I so seriously want the gift of healing to be operating in our church down in the city. I do, and we all want that in every church, don't we? And some of it's self-serving. We're like, man, I'd love for this hip to get better. And God's healed me so many times, but I would love for people to see God's power. I know it's never going to be the way it is in Jesus' day. It was a special time. These are signs of the coming Messiah, It's not going to be the same, but it still happens, and we still need it. So, the eye cannot say to the hand. Now he's moving from the kind of the absurd analogy of the body, the physical body, to how the church works. This is the part that's just got my mind racing all the time. I feel like I'm in an escape room trying to figure out what all this means, and I've never been to an escape room. I think they're kind of silly, personally. I hope you don't like them, because if you do, I've just insulted you. But the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. Another way of saying, you can't look at anybody in this room and go, I don't need you. Craig, I don't need you. That would be absurd, wouldn't it? I need Craig more than almost any person here. On the contrary, those parts of the body that, think about some of these words, that seem weaker. This is where we got to be real ruthless with ourselves when we think about our church and the church. Who do you look at in the church, not necessarily here, but and you just think of your whole church history where you're like, oh yeah, that guy's just barely hanging on. Yeah. Well, I'm glad he's here because he doesn't have much going for him. Where would he be if he wasn't here? He seems weak, or oh yeah, he's got a lot of growing to do. And you can really even put it in kind of glowing terms, right? You can actually love them, but still subtly devalue them. Because many of us here, me too, have some pretty serious problems. And I'm a listener, and I know a lot of your problems. And I'm not shocked by any of them. I am not. Because that is the nature of the world. And for some reason, I just picked up my paper and I put this little magnet on it to hold it. Now I'm going to reverse that decision because that was a bad decision because I got to turn the page soon. The parts that seem to be weaker are indispensable. What do you, sorry, I get a little cramp there. One of my weaker members kicking up. What do you have in your life that's indispensable? I mean, we might say our spouse, our job. Well, job can be replaced, right? Your house, well, you could get another house. You know, there's not much that we can say is truly indispensable. We got things that are useful, things that we should let go. But here he's saying that the parts of our body, this church, all churches, and the church at large, he's saying the parts that seem weaker are actually indispensable. They have a function, right? And we got to break out of our thinking. It's like, well, what is that function and how do we facilitate that? Could we maybe work on a training here and how to help them really come into their own? It's like, I don't think you're getting it because I'm not getting it. I don't know what it means, but I'm desperate to know. But until I know, here's what I do know. I have to treat them as if they're indispensable, even if I can't see it, because I'm about to go Baptist on you, because God's word says. I've never been a Baptist. I think they're pretty cool, though. God's word says they're indispensable. Do you need more? Do you really need to understand it all, or can you rest in his sovereign power and choice? They're indispensable. Indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. Again, he's using, when you think about the body analogy, there's one commentator, I think it was Gordon Fee in his commentary on Corinthians, he's talking about, his opinion is that Paul's talking about the internal organs, the stuff that are hidden from view. And if you looked at them, you'd go, oh, who wants to be the kidney of the church? You can live without a hand. I'll say no more. And we won't discuss who is the colon of our church, because it might be me. And I would be honored to be your colon. I wonder if anybody's ever said that in a sermon before. Yeah, I like that. It might be a book I'll write. Honored to be your colon by Mike Dotson. Somebody write that down for me. Naomi's laughing, that's all I need. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty. Now, this is pretty clear. And when I'm teaching at Waymakers, I call it the bikini area. But that's exactly what Paul's talking about. He's like, you got organs that you don't just put on show. Now, maybe in Greek culture, in some venues they did, but he says, you treat those with special modesty. You protect them from shame and needless exposure, right? That's what we need to be doing with the most vulnerable among us. Protect them from shame and needless exposure. And God help us if we're the ones that do that. God help us. Sorry. That's moving, isn't it? I never really thought about it like that way until yesterday. And I'm like, I was just undone. It's like modesty. And we don't think a lot about modesty. We all have it to some degree. I have it to a very large degree. If somebody said, hey, Mike, I'll give you $1,000 if you take your shirt off during the sermon, I'd be like, maybe. If we go further than that, I'm like, hard no. He says, well, our presentable parts needs no special treatment. Paul's saying there's people among you that don't really need special treatment. Awesome, kudos to you. I think we all need certain things, but maybe not special treatment. Maybe you're one of those people that's been really blessed. I think I've met like 2 of them in my life where I'm like, as far as I can tell, sir, you've had no major trauma, you have no major mental illness, you've never struggled with addiction, you seem good. And then we talked a little more, I'm like, oh yeah, I missed that. But some of us are in better shape, spiritually, emotionally, and so much of it has been spared major trauma. So he says, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. And then he goes on to say, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it. Again, I don't know what it means. I'm struggling to understand. I know what it means conceptually, but on the ground, day to day, I'm practicing it. I'm trying to do it, where you give special honor to somebody for something that maybe doesn't seem very significant, but to them, it's the world. I remember when I was still a probation and parole officer, I ran a group. I had a whole caseload of people with severe mental illness, and they canceled my program. I took it to another program. They're like, hey, Mike, just keep your caseload. Work in this other program. This other program was full of gang guys. And I love them too. I've had a number of them, and they are not always what they seem. But we're in a group, and an older guy who's just so disabled, and just, he's like in his 60s, and we're talking about, hey, what do you want to do? What are your dreams? And he said he'd like to open a grocery store or be a lawyer. Now, this is a low-functioning guy, really low-functioning guy. I don't even know how far he was able to go in school. And he's like 67 years old. And all these young guys, gang guys, they start laughing at him. And I'm like, oh no. So I learned a technique then that has stood me in good stead. I jumped into that, and I'm like, you know what? Oh, no, guys, I think you're misunderstanding him. What he's saying is he would like to do something to really serve the community and provide for them. And it would be his dream if he could help feed the community or defend people that are in trouble. And I just focused in on him. I'm like, that's so good. That's so good. Those guys just shut up. And then something astounding happened. They felt safe enough to talk too. Because they knew if they said something stupid, or what they perceived as stupid, that I'd defend them, that it'd be okay. It was amazing. So, lost my place. So presental part needs no special treatment, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body. Saying this can lead to division, he says, but if we do the right things, we won't have division in the body. Have you ever been to a church that had divisions? Man, it sucks, doesn't it? Sucks. I mean, I've seen so many churches just torn apart. Having no division sounds really good. And he goes on about it, and this applies to all of us, not just to people that have special circumstances. He says, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. Now, he's talking about weaker members here. Do you have? I don't. I mean, in a way I do, but I can't say I have equal concern for all of you, you know? I have a lot of concern for a lot of you. I have some concern for all of you. Some of you I just don't know. But can you imagine if we had equal concern for everybody? Everybody? Like, that's a pretty cool thing. Then he goes to elaborate that if one part suffer, every part suffers with it. Now we see that, right? Bear one another's burdens, and we know just emptying yourself among people you trust, it makes the load a little lighter. There's a principle there. But if every part suffered when people are suffering, wow, what would that look like? If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. We have a harder time with that sometimes, don't we? Because our own sin, our own pride, our own stuff. Man, I used to struggle with that a lot. It's like just from being marginalized and feeling left out, just somebody else gets something. I'm like, what about me? What about me? I remember one time used to go to a church where you would wear, man, when I was in Bible college, like the uniform of the pastor then was the three-piece suit and the gold chain for the watch, right? Went like this. See this? If I was lower, that would be what do they call that when they cut the baby out of the mom? A C-section scar, but no, this was a gold watch. Why is Lisa laughing? I'm just doing information. And so I'm sitting in church, in Bible college, called, God's working on me, and I'm like, oh. And I'm sitting next to one of my friends who had no interest in any of that kind of stuff at all. Zero, right? He's still my friend. And he's wearing a three-piece suit with a vest. I'm wearing something like this, right? And we're sitting in there, and this old lady, God love her, she comes up and she leans over to us. This is what she looked like leaning over. And he's sitting here, I'm sitting here, and she looks at him, she goes, "Are you called to the ministry?" And I was like, wow, that's all it takes is put on a uniform? And he's like, "No, ma'am." He was cool. But I was like, man, I'm sitting there. She didn't ask me. What a love for her to ask me that question. I felt like I didn't really have much support in that group because I didn't have much support in that group. I was a square peg. So, don't know exactly why I told that story right now, but when one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. He says, now you are the body of Christ. Each one of you is a part of it. So I've been chewing and chewing and chewing on this. And I love the payoff. I want the payoff. I want it for here. This is my church. Waymakers is my church. I want it here and there. No divisions. No divisions. Equal concern for one another. One part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices. Man, I would love to go to that church, wouldn't you? And I think we have a lot of that here. That's why I've been here for 26 years, 5 years, I don't know. And so when we talk about hearing God through the least expected, that's just not words. For me, it's not just hearing things they say, although that happens. It's about emotions. I mean, I have very deep emotions about this. I hear God through my emotions more than I do from people speaking to me sometimes. And so there's a number of ways that happens, and I'm going to go through this because I've got off topic enough that I'm running behind. Just my experience working with people in poverty, people with struggling with disabilities, addictions. The things they say are remarkable sometimes, remarkable. And I've learned that when you listen to people, they start talking. Who knew? Who knew? And so I come up with provocative questions. We got a lady that comes to the pantry. She's maybe every fourth time. She looks like, I mean, she could be on The Walking Dead with no makeup. I mean, drugs have savaged her body. She's barely functioning. I ask her the same question. I got certain questions for certain people. I've asked her several times. I'm like, what would it take for you to get off the streets? And her mind isn't around that. And here's what she usually says. Well, I need a phone. I need a phone. Okay. So we're trying to get the free phone people come and get her a phone, honoring what she thinks, but that's not what she needs. But maybe it's a part of what she needs. You can't get help without a phone in this world. So one of the most amazing things that ever happened to me at the church, whenever people are talking about the things people say, I'd been just hammering some concepts. You know, one of the things I do at Waymakers a lot is repetition. I do it here too. I say the same things over and over and over again. It's going to get tedious for you, if not yet, or maybe not. But one day I had just been hammering certain concepts, and if you've been to Waymakers, I know you've heard this. One day I just asked the congregation, 35 people usually, not as big as this, say, what kind of church do you want to have? And these are all 3 people with disabilities. One raised their hand and said, loving. I'm like, oh, good start. Next person raised their hand and said, kind. I'm like, oh, it's getting better. Third person raised their hand and said, forgiving. And I was like, okay, we can stop there. We can stop there. I stopped them. I'm like, I was and remain amazed by that. Like, and when I thought about that, when I talked to them about it, I'm like, man, I'd go to that church, wouldn't you? If everybody there was loving, kind, and forgiving, what more could you ask for? I didn't tell them that. So their words are honest, raw, unfiltered. Sometimes I'm teaching and they get astounded by Jesus' words. Like the people did in Jesus' time. They're like, what? He said that? You know? How does that work? I'm supposed to forgive my enemies? How do I do that? You know? It's amazing. One of the most moving things to me is their suffering. You know, I wish this would be a whole sermon in itself, but I'm around people that are suffering unbelievably. And I can't do anything about it. Sometimes I can. It's $20 to save their clothes, maybe. I got other things I'm working on. Just to be in it with them. You know, there's so many times, this is going to sound crazy, but I think about what Jesus experienced. I'm not Jesus. I'll never be Jesus. I don't want to be Jesus. It's a lot of work. But I just think about how he came and just entered into suffering and suffered with us. And the book of Hebrews talks about that a lot. We don't have time to talk about that. But there's something really, really important about just entering into suffering with somebody. Not like Job's comforter, where you're like, perhaps you've sinned and it's gone undetected. Perhaps it's your diet. More fiber might relieve you of the... No, just be in it. I feel more like Jesus when I'm in someone's suffering than at any point in my life. When they trust me and they open up and tell me what really happened to them, what they're really going through. It's remarkable. You also see it in their longings, the things that they want, the things that they need. Their thankfulness, amazingly thankful for just the smallest things. I had a guy say something to me the other day. Giving him food, right? We give him a decent amount of food. Hot meal. We're kind of unique in that way. Come twice a week, often as you want, no limit. And there's a guy that comes there who's worked in a lot of food pantries. He's an older guy, remarkable guy. Done a lot of work with Catholic Charities, still helping people. 80-some years old in a beat-up car, taking food to homeless people and driving them to appointments and things. Just an amazing guy. And every time he comes in, he's like, thank you. So usually he calls me Father because he's from a Catholic background. I'm like, not Father, but you can call me whatever you want to call me, it's fine. He said, we go some places and they're mean to us. I'm like, what? I've had other people tell me that you go someplace and you're there to get help and they're not kind. And there was a time we had people that weren't kind either. We've cleaned that house. That was difficult. It's like, you can't come down here and hand people food and then yell at them because they're not following your rules, or you could say that another way. Just that they're thankful that we're not mean, that's heartbreaking, isn't it? Thank you for not being mean while I come to get what I need. Like, wow. But they truly love us, and that's a really big deal. So I just want to ask you some questions, and then I'll make this really quick. So just to think about, your world, is it too big or too small? Do you have some room for people that are deeply in need? I didn't want the life I have. This wasn't my dream when I was a young man. I dreamed of escaping. I wanted a subsistence farm so back far in the woods that you would never find me. That's what I wanted to. Even in Bible college, while God was teaching me and moving me about people in pain and suffering, at the same time, I'm wanting to escape. And I don't feel bad about that. That's me somehow wanting to reclaim who we really are. Like, we're from the Garden of Eden. We're to tame this earth and live in harmony with it. God had other plans for me. And I'm at peace with that now. I'm in a point in my life where I can see all the steps that formed me, and I'm very happy with where I am. And Eden is in the future for me, because we're all anticipating Jesus coming back, setting this all right, and we'll have that new heaven, that new earth to live in.